Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Discourse number 1, chapter 4. One of the important heart-based etiquettes required in acts of worship is that of tranquility, Tuma'ninah. So this chapter is in relation to the concept of tranquility, which is an important etiquette of the heart. Now here it says one of the important heart-based etiquettes. Why is the word heart used here? Now for those who have listened to previous lectures in the commentary, here the I is one. It's one reality. But this one reality is multi-dimensional in its different functions and actions. And depending on which function it is residing in or occupied with, it's given a specific name. Sometimes it's the seer, the hearer, when it's occupied with physically seeing or hearing. But here, sometimes it's in relation to acknowledging that divine proximity at all times, that mahdari presence, acknowledging that Allah is present before you. Remember the prophetic tradition, U'budillah ka'annaka tara, worship Allah as if you're seeing Him. Here the eye, the title assigned to the eye here was that of Ruh, is the huzuri presence. But then the second clause of the tradition, وَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَى, if you don't see Him, if you haven't required that status, that ruhi status of the eye, if you like, وَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَى, or وَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ, yes, وَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَى فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ. I think the tradition went, verily He, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is seeing you. That's the status of the heart. That's the dimension of the heart. Acknowledging that presence of Allah over you. And it's one, and here we call the eye the heart, but the eye is one though. The heart is just describing one dimension of the eye. Anyway, so that's why Imam starts off by saying one of the important heart-based or etiquettes of the heart required in acts of worship is that of tranquility. Now, this is different to the concept of composure and being stationary that is used by the fuqaha in relation to the prerequisites of the salat. One of the prerequisites, canonical prerequisites in the salat, is that one has to be still during one's salat. And when one says Allahu Akbar, one has to be composed, stationary, shouldn't be moving around, and that's something which the fuqaha have. It's in the fiqhi books. And maybe, although Imam hasn't touched upon this here, but it's possible that, because usually everything in the Sharia is a conduit to something esoteric. And it's that esoteric meaning which bears more value. The Sharia is only a means to an end, albeit an essential means, but it's only a first step. So here, maybe this, one of the esoteric meanings behind this being stationary at the time of saying Takbiratul Ihram is one being stationary or being composed or being tranquil in the domain of one's soul. And in this chapter, we want to speak about what does this tranquility of the soul mean? What does this tranquility of the eye, tranquility of the heart? You see, all these are the same here. But what are they referring to? This being tranquil in the physical salat is a conduit to an esoteric tranquility. And that's what we want to explore in this chapter. And we have plenty of these things in the Sharia, all of them being a means to something esoterically essential, spiritually important and significant. For example, sleep, it nullifies one's wudu. here, why should a physical sleep nullify one's wudu? Maybe it's because it wants you to recall the greater sleep. The greater sleep that most people are undergoing whilst physically awake in the physical world, but they're spiritually dormant. And therefore sleep, when you physically sleep, it nullifies the wudu, acting as a conduit for you to do the wudu in the spiritual manner of the wudu. Now I've spoken about that before many times, what that means. But this spiritual wudu is a product of you recalling that you don't want to enter that greater sleep. And that's what the physical sleep is a conduit towards. Or for example, guffawing or laughing during your salat, that nullifies the salat. Why? Because it's indicative of an inner attention to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that inner lack of attention in relation to Allah manifests, once it manifests, many people are inattentive to Allah during salat, but the salat doesn't become nullified. But once that lack of attention reaches a threshold that manifests itself by one's physical laughing during salat, that salat becomes void. And so on and so forth. There are plenty of these kind of examples in the Sharia. But the Sharia is a means, a very important means, to something esoteric. Having tranquility qualifies this spiritual tranquility now. He wants to define what spiritual tranquility is. Having tranquility qualifies when the spiritual traveller executes acts of worship accompanied with composure of the heart and tranquility of the mind. So we need composure of the heart and we need tranquility of the mind in order to acquire spiritual tranquility. Now, what does composure of the heart mean? What does tranquility of the mind mean? Composure of the heart. So first, let's see what they mean, and then very briefly, let's allude to how they are acquired. And then Imam, in this chapter, he mainly focuses on why it's important. Okay, the composure of the heart is realized when one is not preoccupied with other than Allah, or when one is not distressed with other than Allah. The lesser you're distressed with other than Allah, the lesser you're preoccupied with other than Allah, the more composure of the heart you will have, and the more spiritually tranquil you will be. Tranquility of the mind is when one acknowledges wholeheartedly that what one is doing will not be fruitless. Okay? That has to be wholeheartedly acknowledged by one in order for a tranquil mind, that tranquil mind to be acquired. So composure of the heart and tranquility of the mind. These two are two elements to becoming spiritually tranquil. Now, how does one acquire these two elements? Maybe, I think the answer here lies in Tawheed. The more one studies Tawheed, the more one, with sincerity of the heart, really tries and acknowledges and understands Tawheed in all its dimensions more and more deeply, the more easier it will become to acquire this composure of the heart and tranquility of the mind. Now, I do have a mini series on Tawheed, alhamdulillah. I think it's 2 lectures on Tawheed. For those who are interested, those 2 may help you in this regard. Yes, okay. Then Imam continues, after all, if one carries out the ibadat accompanied with distress of the heart, those ibadat will not become incorporated into the heart, leaving no effects upon the soul. Hence the truth of ibadat will not become embodied into the soul. Now this is the use of tranquility now. You want your ibadat, you want your actions, your good actions, to become incorporated into your soul. The means to facilitate incorporation of ibadat and good actions is for the heart, for the soul to be tranquil. Only then, like a sponge, you can receive all those good actions and incorporate them in your heart. One of the wisdoms, Imam writes, behind repetition vis-a-vis the ibadat, and one of the wisdoms behind the excessive repeating of invocations and adhkar, is so that the heart becomes a recipient to them, the heart being the soul, the I. The heart becomes a recipient to them, to those adhkar, to those ibadat. And for such invocations to be incorporated into the heart, so that the truth of dhikr and the truth of ibadat constitutes one's inner reality. You are your actions. Once these ibadat, these invocations become incorporated within you, they become you. You become La ilaha illallah. You become your adhkar, your invocations. See, when we go to the cemetery, for example, say Assalamu alaikum ya ahla la ilaha illallah. See, you're saying salams to the people of La ilaha illallah. But those people have passed away. They underwent a physical death and they entered a higher realm, barzakh, and after barzakh, after that physical death. But we want to acquire, and undergoing that physical death, now they're seeing all the truths. Okay, they're in unity, they're aware of all the truths now. But it may be too late for many of them, because they were forced, this death was forced upon them. Okay? But if you undergo mutu qabla an tamutu, if you die a spiritual death before the physical death, that's when you become in unity with your actions. Those become in unity with your invocations. You become ahla la ilaha illallah. But not after physical death, before physical death. You become ahla, people of la ilaha illallah. Because you underwent that physical death, the spiritual death, before that physical death. And undergoing that spiritual death is because you have succeeded in incorporating the invocations within you as a result of that tranquility. And therefore you became ahla la ilaha illallah before that physical death. So, also one's heart becomes united with the spirit of ibadah. See? And once the heart becomes in unity with the spirit of ibadah, you become ahla al-ibadah. You are your actions. لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. Man is but that which he strives for. But striving and doing these ibadat and these good actions and these invocations and so on and so forth, they have to be incorporated within you. It's difficult. For that incorporation to be realized, it's going to be difficult. How can we facilitate it? Tranquility of the heart. And that's the purpose of this chapter, and that's why Imam has brought it in the first discourse of Adabus Salaat. Then Imam continues, as long as the heart lacks assurance, lacks composure, and lacks tranquility, invocations and rituals will not have an effect upon it. And so these actions will not convey their effect from the superficial and physical dimension to the celestial and esoteric dimension of the soul. If you want that transition to be made from the superficial and physical actions, the physical salat, the physical invocations and so forth, if you want that to be conveyed, for a successful transition to be made to your celestial and esoteric dimension of the heart, if you want those to be incorporated into your heart, it won't happen. As long as the heart lacks assurance, lacks that tranquility, isn't composed, as we've defined these terms, as long as these exist, these lack of these elements, that transition will not be made. And so the heart will experience no profit from the truth of ibadah. You maybe pray all your life, but you won't experience any benefit. You won't profit from your ibadat. And that's why people may come to me and say, I do my salat, I do it at the first instance, but still, I don't have this, I don't have that, I don't experience this, well, this is the answer. Tranquility of the heart. At least it's part of the answer. This latter point, Imam continues, is self-evident and does not need proving. He says, okay, this point that Imam mentions, that these ibadat have to be conveyed via a medium, and this medium is composure of the heart, and this medium is that tranquility of the heart, tranquility of the mind, and so on and so forth. Without this medium, the ibadat won't be incorporated. And he says this point, there's no need to prove it deductively. It's a self-evident point. Everyone understands this truth. Now Imam stops here, but maybe this is what, I want to give one or two examples, just to at least buttress Imam's point here. For example, when you're revising for examinations, and you keep on, memorizing and learning, and then what you're revising becomes incorporated within you. Now, let's say the environment in which you're revising. Let's say you're revising in a very quiet room, you're composed, and you eat well whenever you need to. There are no interferences. You've switched off the mobile phone, or you don't go out, and you just focus in a very tranquil and composed environment. Here you see that which you're revising will be incorporated within you very quickly, very rapidly, and it'll stay, at least for some time. Now you just imagine revising for your exams in an environment where there's a lot going outside, a lot of noise pollution, people coming in your room constantly, the mobile's on, constant calls. You see, here you're compromising your revision here. You're compromising that transition to your soul. Memory is also a dimension of the soul. Okay? Here you're compromising it with all these mental interferences from outside. Also, when you're revising, remember when we defined tranquility of the mind, sometimes we said in tranquility of the mind, you have to acknowledge wholeheartedly that what you're doing will not be fruitless. Now here, sometimes you may be revising, but you don't believe that the materials that you're revising will help you. Okay? You're doubting it. Well, that's going to compromise your revision when you're doubting the materials. But when you're reading the materials and you say to yourself, these materials are important, they will not be fruitless, it has an effect on the passage of revision within the nafs, within the soul, within the heart, and so on and so forth. Okay. Next, Imam says, if one's ibadat, although when I say Imam says, see, these lectures on the commentary of Adabus Salaat, it's not a strict translation that I'm reading from. Okay, it's a rough translation, and so I don't want you to think that this is an exact translation. It's a very rough translation which I prepare, and then I give a short commentary, a brief commentary on that rough translation which I've made. So don't treat it as Imam's words per se, to the dot. Okay. If one's ibadat place no effect upon one's heart, they may, if the ibadat, they don't become incorporated into the heart, leaving no effect upon the heart, these ibadat may, I stress the word may here, not be preserved in the other succeeding realms of existence, and they will not ascend from this physical realm to the metaphysical realms. Because here, from moment to moment in this world, we're moulding our hereafter. We're moulding our barzakh and qiyamah from action to action in this realm. But if your ibadat, due to that negative medium, leaves no effect upon the heart, they're not going to be preserved in the succeeding realms. Any remains of one's ibadat may even become effaced, eliminated on nearing death, or even after death, with its accompanying burdens. Because actions and ibadat, they were never moulded within one, they were never blended within you, they were never fused, incorporated within the soul. So when you near death, or possibly after death, since they were never incorporated firmly, they were only, 50-50 states within you, they may all become eliminated. There was nothing firmly ingrained within you. Ad-dunya mazra'atul akhirah. The world is the hereafter's farmyard. You reap what you sow, but you never reaped. That's the problem. You never paid attention when you were reaping, when you were harvesting, when you were cultivating, when you were laying the seeds. You never paid attention. They were never laid properly. And therefore the harvest will be compromised. So if the ibadat, if good actions don't become ingrained within you, they don't become incorporated within you, then they won't be preserved. And then you'll be spiritually blind in the hereafter. Man kana fi hadhihi a'ma fahuwa fil akhirati a'ma. Chapter 1772. Okay, those who are blind, spiritually blind, of course it doesn't mean physically blind. It don't make any sense then. Those who are spiritually blind in this world, they're going to be spiritually blind in the hereafter. What does spiritually blind mean? They're going to be bare of actions, because their actions never became incorporated within the soul. The hereafter is a dimension of the soul. The physical body has ended now. We have nothing to do with the physical body anymore. We have nothing to do with the superficial external actions that the physical body did anymore. The question now is, did those physical external actions of the physical body, when one was physically alive, were they moulding one? Were they building one? Did they build the hereafter or not? But if it had no effect upon the heart, on the soul, no, it won't. Nothing will be preserved. All of a sudden one sees oneself as empty-handed before Allah. You've acquired nothing, and that's going to be painful. I'm not saying you'll go to hell, but still it's going to be painful, even if you do enter a minimal heaven, because you did all the wajibat, for example. You've refrained from the sins. By way of example, if one recites the formula La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, if one recites this formula with the heart's composure and with the tranquility of mind, gradually the heart's tongue, not the physical tongue here, becomes activated. And the superficial tongue is a function of the esoteric tongue. Our physical tongue follows from what is going on in our inside. What's going on in our hearts? Our hearts, it's immaterial. It has a physical, it has an immaterial tongue too. It has an immaterial eye, ear, and so on and so forth. Imam says that with the heart's composure, with tranquility of the mind, gradually this heart that you've worked on, the soul, and here, as a result of that relationship with Allah, that filling one's heart with Allah and discarding other than Allah, one only has one heart. One doesn't have two hearts. مَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِرَجُلٍ مِنْ قَلْبَيْنِ فِي جَوْفِهِ, chapter 33, verse 4. We don't have two hearts. We don't have two sources of recalling. We only have one source of recalling. and that we have to use by recalling Allah, filling ourselves with Allah. If you don't use that one source of recalling by fulfilling yourself with Allah, and then recalling the dunya, well, you're going to recall Allah less. The more you recall other than Allah, the less you will recall Allah. But you can't recall Allah and other than Allah. This is the point here. You have to only recall Allah. That doesn't mean don't marry, don't work, don't study, don't have a good time. Have all these things. But Allah has to be in the equation. Action to action, whatever the action is, be it ibadat or non-ibadat, you have to, through those actions, fill your heart with Allah. Then gradually the heart's tongue becomes activated, and the physical tongue is just a function of the esoteric tongue. Now, if you succeed in recalling Allah from moment to moment, then that's superficial tongue with its invocations and so on and so forth will be of benefit to you. And then superficially recalling Allah with that physical tongue, because it's a function of that pure heart which constantly recalls Allah, that action of the tongue, that physical action of the physical tongue, with repetition then becomes incorporated. Now you're moulding yourself. And here Imam says this former point, and he says, referring to this truth, is the tradition by Imam Sadiq, who said in Misbah al-Sharia, this is an indirect approval of this book which has been attributed to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. It's called Misbah al-Sharia. It has been translated, I think, by, I've forgotten the name now, but it has been translated into English, and I have seen it many years ago, and I thought it was a good translation. So it is something I would advise, and it was the title was translated as Lantern of the Path. Ha'iri was the name of the person who translated it. Yes, I just recalled it now. And there is it's attributed to Imam Sadiq, the tradition that Imam says, assign your heart, okay, as the tongue's qibla. Do not move the tongue, save with the heart's guidance, save with the intellect's accordance, and save with the satisfaction of faith. So he says, this physical tongue, it's qibla. Assign your heart as the qibla of this physical tongue. Don't move the physical tongue. Save with the heart's guidance, the intellect's accordance, and the satisfaction of faith. Now this needs explanation here. Here, when it says don't move your tongue, save except for when the heart guides it, okay? What does the heart mean? What does the guidance of the heart mean here? If you recall, we said that tranquility of the heart means the heart has to be composed and the mind has to be tranquil. I mean, these two are important elements. Here, in relation to not moving the tongue except for the heart's guidance, here, if you recall, with the definition of that element of composure of the heart, we said it meant that one should not be preoccupied with other than Allah, have no distress, no interferences. And then with this lack of interferences, with this absence of distresses, these distress factors, here the heart will guide you and tell you to invoke Allah, to call upon Allah. And then you do that with your physical tongue, and then that repetition of those invocations of that ibadat and so on and so forth, that becomes incorporated properly within you, and it will be embedded, ingrained, and that will be embodied in the hereafter. You see? So here composure of the heart is meant by the heart's guidance, but you have to be interference and distress free, and then that will allow the heart, which is free from all distractions now, to tell you to do the ibadat. Now it's the time. to invoke Allah, and so on and so forth. And then when you start doing it with your physical limbs, the tongue, the physical hands, feet, and so on and so forth, here those actions now, with that scaffolding of interference-free and distress-free medium, now these actions become incorporated. You successfully and properly will mold yourself, build yourself. So don't move the tongue except with the heart's guidance. Then it says except, and also secondly, except with the intellect's accordance. Here, what is the intellect is also one dimension of the eye. It's when the eye is rationalizing. And here, what is meant is, don't move your tongue before you understanding what you're saying. You have to understand what the salat is. You have to understand what the formulae are that you're reciting. You have to understand these invocations. It's going to be a very minimal benefit for the person if they don't understand the meaning of the salat or the meaning of the invocations. There will be some benefit still. I don't deny that. And inshallah we'll come and speak about the grades of ibadat, the stages that one has to undergo. Okay? However, if one doesn't understand it, if one doesn't believe that what one is doing will be fruitful, okay, and doesn't understand the invocations, doesn't understand the ibadat, and so on and so forth, here the heart will just, the intellect will not give the green light for you to just move the tongue. The Imam is saying, look, this moving of the tongue, you can't just do it nilly-willy. The heart has to give the go-ahead, so does the intellect. When will the intellect give the go-ahead? It's when you understand what you're saying. And thirdly, and don't move your tongue save with the satisfaction of faith. Here, irrespective of what your purpose is behind the salat and invocations, what your intentions are, irrespective of whether your wishes or your requests will be fulfilled or not, okay, you should know, as a sign of your faith and satisfaction of your faith, that this is for the better. You have faith after all. You have to understand this. Don't move your tongue before the eye of faith acknowledges and is satisfied with what you're doing. And when will that satisfaction of one's faith be realized? When one doesn't, it won't matter to one if it comes, if one's, for example, one's du'as will be accepted or not, because one believes that this is for the better. One believes that supplication, whoever supplicates, is for the better, irrespective of whether one's wishes become realized or not. Also then, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, don't move your tongue before this is also realized. Before this is realized, it's better not to. I mean, this don't move your tongue, it's not an obligatory instruction, okay? Maybe most of us, 90% of the time, we move our tongues without these three. But the whole purpose is to strive towards moving the tongue back after monitoring three important phases, and that's the heart's guidance, the intellect's accordance, and the satisfaction of faith. In the beginning of one's journey, Imam says, when the heart's tongue is yet to be activated, the heart's tongue, the traveller towards the hereafter must teach the heart and convey invocations to it vis-a-vis a medium of composure and tranquility. So these invocations, these ibadat, they have to be accomplished within a medium. That medium is that composure and tranquility of the heart. On opening up, i.e. the heart's tongue, once it opens up, the heart becomes the qibla of the tongue and all other limbs. Once the heart starts its invoking it's recalling Allah more and more, constantly, all other limbs follow suit and invoke. But if the aforementioned invocations is done in a composure-less and non-tranquil medium, and is executed in haste and distress and mental over-preoccupation, no effect will be transmitted to the heart, and so remains in the domain, those effects will remain in the domain of the superficial limbs, and thus becomes easily eliminated effect-wise. It'll have no effect. You did it in a very bad medium. You threw the seeds without paying attention in cultivating them properly, laying them inside under the earth properly. You did it hastily. You didn't reap. And since you didn't reap properly, you won't sow properly. You reap what you sow. Inna dunya mazra'atul akhirah. Laysa lil insani illa ma sa'a. You have to strive properly. But if you do it in a non-tranquil medium, a composure-less medium, you do it in a rushed manner, you're not going to make that transition to the inside work. Hence, this is an important result that follows now. When Imam says hence, he says, hence, when burdens arise at the time closely preceding and succeeding death, all invocations may be effaced. Even the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even the name of His Messenger, even the name of the holy religion of Islam, even the holy book, even the Imams, and all articles of faith that had not been transmitted to the heart will be effaced, erased, eliminated. Even articles of faith. Because those articles of faith, they weren't understood. They weren't wholeheartedly acknowledged in a proper medium. It was either done in a taqlidi fashion, it was either done in a cultural fashion, but it was never done as it should have been learned. It was never learned as it should have been learned. Even the name of your religion, the name of the Imams will be forgotten. Because the Imams never entered you. The Quran never entered you. It was all a superficial thing. How can we tell at what status we're in? Have you dreamt of the Imam? Have you dreamt of important scholars? Have you dreamt of the holy book? Have you dreamt of reciting the holy book? Have you dreamt of religion? If you have, it shows some degree of that becoming incorporated within you. If you haven't, it doesn't mean that it hasn't been incorporated. Don't get me wrong here. Some people don't dream. Some people, because of their, the hormone levels, I think one of them was the thyroid levels or other different hormones, it can have an effect and hinder one's dreaming. That's okay. Okay? Don't look at it the other way. But if you have dreamt, it's positive. But if you haven't dreamt, it may be positive, it may be negative. It doesn't mean it's negative. So I have to be clear there. Other ways you can differentiate it doesn't have to be through dreams. There are many different ways. Inshallah, we can go through this one day. But another is, you're recalling the Quran, you're recalling the Imams at the time of burdens. When something suddenly happens, do you recall the Imams, or do you just totally forget everything about religion at that exact time? Okay? Okay. So all these may be effaced. And at the time of questioning of the angels, the people will have nothing to answer to. Because nothing was incorporated within them. So they say, what is your religion? They'll have nothing to answer to. Who is your Lord? They'll have nothing to answer to. They have nothing to answer to. You reap what you sow. You never reaped anything. Because religion for you was only acquired in the worst of media. There was no medium of composure, no medium of tranquility, and so on and so forth. reciting the talqeen for such people will be useless, Imam says here. Since they see the truth of Tawheed, the truth of messengerhood or messengership, the truth of all these not having any effect upon their hearts. That's going to be something horrific. When the people die, the eye persists. Then in Islam we have something called the talqeen, where you recite the talqeen. It's like a funeral dirge, so to speak. And there you say, listen to me, O son of X or Y or whatever, or daughter of, your father and all that. And then in this talqeen, you face the corpse too. The reason there is because for many people, when they pass away, it takes time before they realize that they're detached from, they have nothing to do with the physical body. In the beginning, many people think it's still them, that corpse is still them. Anyway, in the Sharia it says, face the corpse and recite this. Now, you're reciting there, the whole aqa'id is recited in the talqeen. But this reciting of the talqeen, where all the aqa'id, that Allah is one, the Holy Messenger is the last messenger, there were 124,000 messengers also. All the things in the talqeen, you can find it in Mafatih al-Janan. There, it will be useless for the person. It will be useless for the eye. Why? Because they haven't acquired anything in their hearts. They won't benefit. They can't benefit. But if they had incorporated something, they would recall something. But it's totally, out of harmony to them right now. And that can be very frightening. Then Imam says, one tradition states, one hadith states that a group of the Holy Messenger's ummah will forget the Holy Messenger's name due to seeing the grandeur of the owner of hell. So, in Qiyamah, as a result of seeing the owner of hell, I think, seeing the owner will be so frightening to these people. And since these people, they may have been good people, but they didn't incorporate as they should have, and therefore they can't combat this grandeur of of hell. Okay? They will forget even the Holy Messenger's name. And even more scary is, Imam says that even though the same hadith mentions that these members of the ummah are faithful and whose figures are luminous. So they were mu'min. But still, Iman has degrees to it. You can't satisfy yourselves or suffice with the lower degrees of faith, because you may fall short. So if the articles of faith aren't incorporated enough, even you, a mu'min, a mu'minah, may still fall short and forget the Holy Messenger's name. Fattabi'uni, follow me. In the Quran, the Holy Messenger says, follow me. This abidance, this obedience to the Prophet has degrees to it. We have to maximally follow him, so that na'udhu we don't forget his name in the hereafter. You reap what you sow. Then commentating on the tradition where, now here, Imam says that it's a tradition where Allah says that I will be the servant's hearing and I will be the servant's seeing. Kuntu sam'ahu wa basaruhu, and so on and so forth. This tradition is in relation to Qurb Nawafil. It's a station of Irfan. It's a station of faith here, a degree. We haven't touched upon it. It's very important that we have to do it one day. I'm just waiting for the right time. Maybe in the book we'll come to it once. But we have traditions which indicate Qurb Nawafil, reaching that divine proximity through the Nawafil, but it doesn't mean just the physical Nawafil. It's a more delicate irfani understanding here. And then we have Qurb Fara'id, reaching that divine proximity through the Wajibat, but it doesn't mean the Wajibat, what we have in the Shari'ahs and everything. It's much more deeper. Because Qurb Nawafil is a lesser degree to qurb fara'id. Qurb fara'id is a much higher degree. There is no I there, but in qurb nawafil the I still persists. And this will be explained later, but I just wanted to clarify, because many people think it's just proximity through nawafil, that the Sharia says the nafil is the mustahabbat, and it's proximity through the fara'id, the wajibat. No, it's something deeper than that. Anyway, those traditions, and we have traditions which indicate this. Irfan isn't built on willy-nilly statements. It's all based on traditions of the Ahlul Bayt versus the Holy Quran. We have sacred traditions where Allah says, "Kuntu sam'ahu wa basaruhu." I will be his seeing. I will be his hearing. I will be his seeing. Here, Allah is the instrument for the servant. It's a high degree. But sometimes, kana sam'i, he the servant will be my hearing. Wa basari, he the servant will be my seeing. The servant has become the instrument now. And there's no elements of I. The ego has been eliminated here. Anyway, this has to be touched upon later, but here the purpose is in this tradition where qurb nawafil is mentioned, where Allah says, I will be his hearing, I will be his seeing, and so on and so forth. Allame majlisi. Now, Imam is quoting Allame majlisi here. This is incredible. Because Allame majlisi, first of all, he has respect before all scholars in Islam. But in Irfani discussions, there's a debate as to how Allama Majlisi sees many points, and if he differs or not to the Urafa. And it's a long discussion, and there may be no right answer here. But anyway, Imam is referring to him, he's saying that Allama Majlisi, in relation to this verse, this tradition where Allah says, I will be the servant's hearing, I will be the servant's seeing, Allama Majlisi writes. Now this is translation. Imam gives the address to this too. He says, Allama Majlisi says, one who does not employ one's eyes, ears and other limbs in the line of obedience to Allah will not possess spiritual eyes and spiritual ears. Okay, then in between, now this in between the hyphens, I've inserted these hyphens. It's not there in the book. He says, these physical and bodily eyes and ears will not go to the hereafter. Okay, then we end there with the second hyphen. Continuing from the statement that such a person who doesn't employ one's eyes, ears and other limbs in the line of obedience to Allah will not possess spiritual eyes and ears, and in the realm of the grave, i.e. barzakh, and in the realm of resurrection, qiyamah, they will be eyeless and earless. Spiritual eye less, spiritual ear less. Because before, in between the hyphens, he says, these physical and bodily eyes and ears, they won't go to the hereafter. They won't go to barzakh onwards. See? Referring to an immaterial hereafter. Not a physical bodily hereafter. An immaterial bodily hereafter. There will be eyes, there will be ears, but they will be immaterial or semi-immaterial. They won't be physical. But those who don't use these physical eyes and these physical ears and other limbs in the line of obedience to Allah in this world, okay, in the realm of the grave, in the realm of barzakh, in the realm of resurrection, they will be eyeless, earless. And the balance and criterion to the questioning and answering of the grave is the spiritual limbs. It's the spiritual eyes and ears, the spiritual mouth. But if there is no ear, mouth, limb in barzakh, how are you going to answer it in the questioning of the angels? You haven't acquired a harmony to answer those questions. Because you never incorporated anything. You can't answer. You were blind in the world, you're going to be blind in the hereafter. If there are going to be no spiritual limbs, okay, you won't be able to answer anymore. You have nothing good, the spiritual limbs, to help you. But you have bad. You have plenty of that. And that's going to be embodied in a very negative way. Okay, so, and to become spiritual, and to acquire these spiritual limbs, it has to be acquired, through that medium of composure and tranquility. Otherwise, you're going to be spiritually blind. 1772, Man kana fi hadi a'ma, fahuwa fil akhirati a'ma. From Barzakh onwards, you're going to be blind. And this physical body, this physical ear, this physical eye, that's not going to go to the grave with you. And Al-Majid says, that's not going to go to resurrection with you. Because if they were to go in the grave, if the physical ears and eyes were to go to the grave, were to go to Qiyamah, they would see something. Okay? Albeit physically, but that's not the criterion. The balance and criterion to the questioning and answering of the grave is the spiritual limbs. Okay. Next, on the theme of tranquility and composure, the Holy Quran commands us towards tartil of the Quran. Now, tartil of the Quran is reciting the Quran in a slow, measured pace. Now, this is important. Why? Why does the Quran command us to tartil and not just quick reading? It wants the meaning, the Quran, the verses to be incorporated within you. In order for the verse of the Quran to become incorporated within you, it has to be done in a certain way. That composure has to be there, that tranquility has to be there. Helping with this is reciting the Quran slowly, in a measured tone. Now, 1 or 2 years ago, I was invited to the Vatican to give a speech on this reciting and how we relate with the Quran. The paper has been published for those who are interested in. The book is called Monastic and Shia Spirituality in Dialogue. Monks and Muslims. Monastic and Shia Spirituality in Dialogue. The paper is there, but I'll just recite some parts of this paper. Now the purpose is this, that we want to recite the Quran in a manner so that the Quran becomes incorporated within us. That's the whole aim here. Now in this chapter, it all speaks about composure and tranquility of the heart. Imam says, that's why the Quran says, recite the Quran in a tartili manner. In a slow, measured manner, pace. Here, I'm just reading now from that paper. I'll do it quite, with your permission. I may miss one. Here, in the section entitled Etiquette of Recitation, okay, I mentioned 5 points here. I'll just mention some of them. The traditions describe a vast spectrum of physical and mental activities that aid the recitation of the Quran in a way that makes it possible to reach one's ultimate destination. These include, number 1, washing one's mouth before recitation. Mouths have been described in prophetic traditions as transits to the Quran. As the Holy Prophet said, freshen your mouths with a pleasant aroma. After all, your mouths are a transit to the Quran. 2, uttering the formula of seeking protection, isti'adha. Uttering the formula, I seek protection of Allah from the outcast Satan. In 1698 we read, when you recite the Quran, seek the protection of Allah against the outcast Satan. Imam Sadiq ﷺ said that we should lock the doors to sinning by means of uttering the formula of isti'adha and open the doors of obedience by reciting the Basmala formula. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. 3, reciting in a measured tone. In chapter 73 verse 4 we read, recite the Quran in a measured tone. Commentating on this verse, the Holy Prophet has said, recite the Quran articulately and in a measured tone. Do not execute it in a manner. And this, number 3, is the important point. So I'm reading this. So recite the Quran articulately and in a measured tone. Do not execute it in a manner such as the random cultivation of seeds or the hurried reading of poems. Pontificate over its marvels and synchronize your recitation with the heart's pulse, and do not let your endeavors be confined to merely completing the chapter. That's a very important tradition there. For those who are interested, I got that from Mizanul Hikmah, volume 10. Okay, or tradition number 4826 for those who have it. Okay. Then number 4, deliberating, contemplating while reciting. In chapter 47, verse 24, we read, "Do they not contemplate the Quran, or are there locks on their hearts?" And in chapter 38, verse 29, we read, "It is a blessed book that we have sent down to you, so that they may contemplate its signs, and that those who possess intellect may take admonition." In chapter 4, verse 82, Allah states, "Do they not contemplate the Quran? Had it been from someone other than Allah, they would have surely found much discrepancy in it." Amir al-Mu'mineen said, "There is no virtue in recitation that is not accompanied by contemplation." And the Holy Prophet has said, "Whoever contemplates the Quran's recitation within 3 days will not acquire true understanding with respect to it." And then number 5, humility is also important for the Quran to be incorporated within one. In chapter 57, verse 16, we read, "Is it not time yet for those who have faith," me and you, okay, that's referring to me and you, "that their hearts should be humbled for what? For Allah's remembrance and to the truth which has come down to them," the Holy Quran. Humility is the meaning here. We have to humble ourselves before the Quran. And then that medium of humility will allow that Quran to be incorporated within us. And not to be like those who were given the book before, referring to the Jews. And sometimes we see, here at the end I write, the Holy Prophet would always enjoin weeping and lamentation when reciting the Quran, because it creates an important medium for that transit to be made. And then I end, and we speak about muraqabah in that paper. Okay. Then, in one tradition, Imam continues, it reads, "One who forgets a surah of the Quran, in heaven that surah will appear before him or her in a form which one had seen no better." So one who's it's incredible. One who has memorized a verse, a chapter of the Quran, then they've forgotten now that chapter of the Quran. They're no longer, they can't memorize it. When one memorizes something, that becomes part of one. They become in unity with that thing which they've memorized. So here, one who forgets a surah of the Quran, in heaven, that surah, that chapter, will appear before him or her in a form which one had seen no better. On seeing it, one will say, "Who are you? How pleasant you seem. I wish you were of me," i.e., I wish you were a product of mine. It'll then reply, the surah will then reply, "Don't you recognize me? I am such a surah. Had you not forgotten me, I would have raised you to such an elevated status." Now this is incredible. This shows that this encounter which people will have with that surah of the Quran is going to be, it's going to destroy one. It's going to be painful. Why? Because even negative actions such as forgetting a surah, you've forgotten it now. See, sometimes it becomes incorporated within you and you've memorized it. But when you forget it, it's still incorporated within you, but it's going to be negative. It's still incorporated within you, but it's not the surah it's not the surah, the chapter which is incorporated within you now because you've forgotten. But something still is going to be incorporated within you, and that something is going to be very negative. What is it? It's forgetting a surah. And that forgetting, that negative action of forgetting a surah, that's going to be embodied as such. How is it going to be embodied? The surah is going to come, a surah with a very pleasant aroma, which you were in unity with once upon a time. It's going to come and say, and you're going to see it's going to be of a very pleasant aroma, it's going to be very beautiful, this, that and the other, and it's going to tell you, if only you had kept me, you would have reached such and such an elevated status, and that's going to hurt. In another tradition, we read that one who recites the Quran in one's youth the Quran will blend with his flesh and bones. Now why should this be? Here the tradition ends there when it says the Quran will blend with his flesh and bones. Now maybe because during youth the heart's preoccupations and tarnishes are lesser. The responsibility is lesser during our youth. We're less preoccupied. We experience less mental interferences of this, the worldly life and so on and so forth. Hence, the heart becomes more susceptible to being positively affected by the Quran. One becomes more susceptible at a faster pace to the Quran during one's youth. And its effect will persist for longer periods. Because the youth have lesser preoccupations. That medium of composure and tranquility is easier for them. That's not to say it's impossible for, after youth, but one has to build a scaffolding during the youth. It's going to be more difficult if we leave it later. And Imam ends by saying, there are many of such traditions that we shall raise in the section on qira'ah, which is in the second discourse, I think. One last tradition, Imam says, reads, no action is more loved by Allah than that which is done persistently, albeit little. That's the tradition. And this may be so because actions constitute the heart's inner form, okay? But here you're doing it persistently. Even if it's little. But since you're doing it persistently, you're constantly recalling Allah. Because you're doing it persistently, you're constantly recalling Allah with those actions. Because you're persistent in them, albeit they little, but you're persistent. And since you're recalling Allah constantly, because out of that persistence, that's the most loved thing for Allah. Why? Because you recalling Allah, and recalling here does not mean a physical recalling, it's just doing the wajibat, abiding by Allah, obeying Allah, doing the Sharia as a first step. The more you recall Allah, it means the more you love Him. Like a man and woman relationship. The more you recall the woman, the more you recall the man. Because you love them. And then loving Allah suddenly enters the realm of Allah loving you. Man ashaqtuhu qataltu. And whoever I love, Allah says in the tradition, I shall kill. If Allah loves you, then He's going to eliminate all traces of the ego. So see, it's important, but it all starts with you obeying Allah. In Qul, chapter 3, verse, I think 30 or 31. Qul, say, O Prophet, to the people, say what? In kuntum tuhibbun Allah, if you want to love Allah, fattabi'uni, follow me the Prophet. Even, albeit little, do it persistently though. Follow me. Show your love. And if you show your love by following me persistently, yuhbibkumullah, Allah will love you. If Allah loves you, everything will change. All the ego will be eliminated. You're going to be a different person. It's going to cause an inner revolution. So persistency is the key also, and that's important. Okay, so here we end. So just to summarize, the more one decreases one's mental interferences and mental preoccupations, the more one decreases those factors of distress of the heart, the more one increases one's persistency in actions, the more one increases one's focus in actions, the more one decreases one's animalistic tendencies in actions, the more you can recall Allah at all times, and it'll become easier for you to make that transition, that incorporation of actions, invocations and so on and so forth into the heart for them to be ingrained. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى الطاهرين.